You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode number 72. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the podcast. It's Paula here, and I'm so glad to have you back. It has been a month. By the time this episode goes live, we will be in the first week of October 2022. And I can tell you, September 2022 has been on fire. I don't like to use the word busy, but it has been busy. Between the kids going back to school, between all the projects that I scheduled for September, thinking that the kids would be back in school and I would have more time. We have birthdays in the family this month, all those things. I had a presentation today. It was so fun. It was about time scarcity. I delivered it to a law firm and it was so fun to present. And I learned so much as I was preparing because I was applying all the principles that I was teaching. So it was super fun. It was based on a podcast episode. I think it's episode 18 or 19. You can go back and listen to that if you can relate to that feeling of time scarcity. And I think you'll find it really helpful. Now, today we are talking about a topic that seems to be resonating a lot. I have had a number of conversations with lawyers lately, and two of them in particular used exactly the same language to describe the problem that they were having, which of course is analysis paralysis. And whenever I have a topic that seems to come up quite a bit, it's a signal to me that I need to record a podcast episode about it. So today we are going to dive into analysis paralysis, and I'm going to offer you 3 suggestions to help you get unstuck. Now, this question comes up with lawyers that I work with, and sometimes it can be so sticky. Some lawyers reach out to me and they have been grappling with a question for years. Sometimes that question is, do I leave private practice? Do I leave the law altogether? And it's a question where the lawyer who contacts me just isn't able to make a move. And maybe you can relate to having a decision that is weighing on you that is just like that. Whether it's to continue practice or not, whether it is to leave your job or to stay where you are, whether it is to start your own firm or do something different. Whatever it is, it can have that feeling of being really stuck and unable to move forward. And what it might feel like to you is that feeling like there's a right decision and there's a wrong decision, and you don't want to make that wrong decision because it feels like if you were to do that, then you would be trapped, you would be stuck. It feels very final, and the decision continues to weigh on you. But as long as you're not actually making a decision, as long as you're not taking action, nothing changes. And sometimes you might try taking that decision and pushing it to some point in the future, hoping that at that time you'll have a better sense of what to say, yes or no, this option or that option. But often that decision doesn't get easier with time, and sometimes it can even get harder. So what I want to help you with today is to give yourself that vision to step into. If you imagine yourself right now toying with that decision, ruminating, trying to figure out the answer, and you have that sense of stuckness, just imagine what it would feel like if you made a choice and you could step into the freedom of no longer being trapped with this looping decision that is taking over your life. So if this is something that resonates with you, you are in the right place. And I am so excited to be sharing some insights with you today to help you move out of your stuckness. So as I mentioned, there are lots of places where lawyers that I talk to get stuck. Often it's with big career decisions, but it doesn't have to be something that big. I mean, it could also be a conversation that you know you need to have that you're not having. Maybe you're trying to decide about family planning. Do you have another child or not?
Maybe you are making a decision that is related to a relationship. I mean, there are all sorts of different places where you may be stuck. And so these tools that I'm suggesting, these strategies, apply to all of them. And I know that you are resourceful, and I know that you have made decisions in the past. And chances are there are tools that you're already using or strategies you're already trying that aren't getting you the result that you want, i.e., they're not moving you toward a decision. So lawyers, when they come to me, often will have been ruminating over the decision for quite some time. Maybe you've been thinking about it, playing it over, playing the different possibilities out in your mind. And so you've spent a long time thinking about it. Maybe you even started having conversations, or you've long been having conversations with somebody close to you. Maybe it's your partner, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a trusted colleague. And you may find that you're having a conversation that, like the thought loop, is kind of like a looping conversation. You say the same words, you get the same responses, and nothing seems to move forward. It may be also that you start going opinion shopping. So maybe it's not just one person that you're talking to. Maybe you're talking to a bunch of different people and you're asking them all what they think that you should do. And maybe in your mind's eye, you think if you get a certain number of people agreeing that option A is the right choice and option B is not the right choice, then that's the information that you need to go on to make your decision. But ultimately, it's very difficult for you to base your decision on what other people are telling you, because what they are offering is what would be the right decision for them in their circumstances, but it may not be the right decision for you. You may find yourself weighing the pros and cons. You've written out lists and lists and lists of all the pros and cons for all the different options, and yet looking at the factors at play, you're not able to reach a clear decision. Maybe you're researching. I know this is an area that is so easy to get sucked into, where you start researching the possibilities. Maybe you're looking at a particular law firm and you start going on the website and you're researching. Maybe you're talking to people. Maybe you're looking at non-law jobs and you're doing all the research and listening to all the podcasts. By the way, I have some great podcasts from lawyers who have transitioned out of law. I get a lot of questions about that. There's tons of resources in this podcast. But maybe you're researching, but your research isn't taking you to that next level, which is when you transform yourself or you translate your thinking into action. You may also find yourself guessing, right? You may find that you're so frustrated writing the list, having the conversations, doing the research, that you've reached a point where you literally just want to toss a coin and be done with it. So these are all strategies that aren't necessarily getting you to where you want to go. And so what I'm offering today are 3 strategies to help you actually make that transition. So before I offer those, I just want to say one thing, which is, before anything else, give yourself a pat on the back. You might be beating yourself up. You might be getting frustrated with yourself because you're not making a decision. But what I know is that when you are in it, when you are making a decision, it's because it is something that is important to you. My guess is that the decision that you're making has the potential to create real impact, not just in your own life, but on the lives of other people. And if it was an easy decision, you would have made it by now. So before you even think about what other strategies you might be applying, give yourself a high five. Give yourself acknowledgement that what you're doing is challenging and that it is worthwhile and that you may be poised to take a risk that has the potential to impact so many lives. So number 1, I guess, is sort of that bonus, that pre-strategy, is really give that acknowledgement to yourself. Now, there are 3 main strategies that I am going to invite you to consider. And I would also recommend having a pen and paper handy, if you can, as you go through this episode, especially if there is a live decision on your mind that you're trying to resolve, because I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And when you answer those questions, you are going to find way more clarity, but you have to do the work. So let's dive in. First suggestion. I'm going to assume that you already know what your options are. I'm going to assume that you've laid them out and you have already ruled out options that are just not all that appealing. So really what you're doing is weighing options that are neck and neck. These are things that you really would love to do. And once you've done that and you've got your list of pros and cons, what I want you to do is get really into those reasons. I want you to evaluate the reasons, not necessarily what the reasons are, but your reasons for the reasons. Do you like those reasons? So for example, if you have a job offer and one of the reasons that that job is appealing is because it's secure, you might ask yourself, is security a reason that I like? Do I like that reason? And the answer to that might be no. Actually, I want to live a life where I'm on the edge. I'm always pushing the boundary. And a job that is secure isn't really necessary for me to do that. In fact, maybe it's even counter. That might be your reasoning there. Or you might say, absolutely, I want to have a secure job. That is absolutely in line with what I want. I want security. I want stability. I want to know exactly when I'm getting my paycheck. I like that reason. That is a good reason to me. So go through all the different reasons that you've listed and ask yourself, is that a reason that I like? The second question that I want you to ask yourself is when you go through the list of pros and cons, look at the benefits and then ask yourself, what is the benefit of the benefit? So for example, if you go back to security, what is the benefit to you of having a secure job? Well, the reason I want a secure job, the reason that I want that steady paycheck, the predictable income, the predictable hours is because what I really want is to be able to carve out a very well-defined life for myself where I devote X number of hours daily to my family or to something else that I'm really passionate about. I don't want to be thinking about whether I'm going to stay late at the office that night. I don't want to have to worry if I have a fluctuation in income because I want to commit to buying a house and I want to know exactly how much money I'm going to have every week. So those might be benefits of the benefit. So look at what those benefits of the benefits are and see how that aligns with what you want for your life. The same is true for the cons. Look at the con, and then what is the con of the con, right? If you were to say, well, actually, I really don't want that secure job. What I want, that doesn't really work for me because I want to be on the edge. And that's going to cost me the ability to go out there and try something that is creative and entrepreneurial, where I take on that risk. And if I have a job that is too secure, or secure maybe isn't the right word, but maybe it's too predictable, it's not right for me. So that might be the con of the con. So for each of your reasons, I would invite you to go in there and ask yourself some questions about them. And that is so much more meaningful than a list of pros and cons. It actually gets you to start thinking about what is going to resonate with you and what is not. So the second strategy that I want to offer to you is to channel your own inner wisdom. So for all of you who are opinion shopping, and I completely relate. When I have big decisions, I love bouncing that idea off of other people to see what they say. I love getting coaching on it because I like to see what my coaches bring out from that conversation. And I love it when they're able to reflect back to me how I describe the different options, what my body language is when I describe option A versus option B, how my energy might be different when I'm talking about this possibility for the future versus that possibility for the future. So I absolutely see the value in having conversations with others when it comes to figuring out what to do, what option to take. That being said, I would invite you to bring that decision making back to you and to lean on your own wisdom, because my guess is that you know more than you're giving yourself credit for. And one way to channel what you already know is to imagine yourself 5 years out into the future, having made choice A and or choice B. So give yourself those options and imagine yourself 5 years in, you've picked one of them. Ask yourself some questions. Are you happy? What did you do to get there? What was hard about getting there? What can you tell me? What words of advice do you have for me? Think of the kinds of questions that you would want to ask a mentor or somebody else who has gone before you, and then ask yourself those questions, and you will be amazed at the answers that you provide yourself. And you can do that for different scenarios. I mean, you might be looking at one option that seems really risky, but the reward is also potentially really high. And so you ask yourself in the future what that experience is like. You can also do the same. Let's say it's that job that is stable and secure and it's predictable, and that is the job that you're looking at. What does that look like? So for all of your decisions, maybe as a conversation that you need to have, right? A conversation where the consequences of that conversation might be meaningful and impactful. You might not like it. So think about all the different scenarios, right? Think of all the unmade decisions that you have ahead of you right now and imagine yourself in different outcomes and then put yourself there and ask yourself some questions. So number 3, more questions. Yes, the way to get the answers, my friends, is to ask yourself these questions, hard as that is going to be. I would invite you to ask yourself powerful questions. And I'm going to read out a list of questions. There are 7 of them altogether. So as you're looking at the different options, I would invite you to think about which choice requires you to grow more. Now, for some people, growth may not be something that they're going after, but my guess is that if you're listening to this podcast, you are interested in growing. So which option will make you grow more? And it might be surprising to you. Sometimes you might think that changing jobs or changing the situation is going to require more growth of you. Yet, staying where you are might actually be the option that requires you to grow more. For example, if you're in a job and you're not happy, you haven't been voicing your opinion, you haven't been going after what you want, you haven't been setting boundaries with your colleagues, you haven't been setting boundaries with your clients, staying in that job is going to require, if you want to be happy, that you start setting those boundaries, that you start asking for what you want, that you get really clear and intentional. And in that way, you might be required to grow possibly more than if you were to take yourself and put yourself in a different job where you may not have to have those difficult conversations and make those difficult asks. So ask yourself and be honest with yourself, what option is going to require you to grow more? Another question is, which option has the greatest potential? So if you look at what you're trying to accomplish over your life, and this is career-wise, this is non-career-wise, whatever it is that's going on in the matrix that makes up your everyday, which option has the most potential for you? Question 3, what choice feels better? When you're looking at different choices, I think we have a tendency to want to look at the facts and the logic, but sometimes a decision will just feel right. And so I'd invite you to tune into that. Question 4, who do you need to become? If you pick an option that requires you to grow, who do you need to become in that scenario? And part of that question, these next questions are almost like sub-questions, but what do you need to stop doing? If you're going to go after that promotion, what do you need to do differently than what you're doing right now? If you want to start your own firm, what do you need to stop doing that you're currently doing? Similarly, next question, what do you need to start doing? Let's say you stay where you are and you know you need to start implementing boundaries. What does that look like? How is that different from what you're doing now? And then finally, and this is a question that I invite you to really consider, if you didn't feel fear, what option would you choose? And this question, I think, is really powerful and one that I think holds a lot of people back. And I can tell you that in recent conversations, fear has played front and center in the decision-making process. And so your job is to figure out what choice you would make if you didn't feel that fear. Because if you know the answer to the question, then you can manage the fear. And if you go back to one of my earlier podcast episodes, I talk about how to do fear, how to deal with fear. And that is one resource for you to start that process. Because if there's an option available to you that is truly something that calls to you, let's not let fear be what stops you from getting there. So, my friend, let me just go over the suggestions that I've offered today. Number 1 is to look at the reasons that you've allocated the pros and cons and to go deep on those reasons. Do you like them? What are the benefits of the benefits? And what are the downsides of the downsides? Number 2, channel your own inner wisdom. Imagine that you pick a path, put yourself 5 years out, and ask yourself some questions. You will be amazed at what you learn. And number 3, ask yourself powerful questions. And for the benefit of any of you who wanted to write those down or remember them, what choice requires you to grow more? What choice has the greatest potential? What choice feels better? Who do you need to become? What do you need to stop doing? What do you need to start doing? And if you didn't feel fear, what option would you choose? When you are able to finally make that decision, you will feel free. You will feel free from indecision. You will be able to take decisive action. You will feel peace in knowing that you gave yourself the benefit of choosing, that you are now able to live your life with intention instead of in reaction to indecision and potentially in reaction to your own fear. And when you make that choice, you have the potential to get what it is that you really want. What is required of you, it is not easy. Making a decision, if you are truly stuck in analysis paralysis, it is such a difficult decision. And number one, you're going to need to let go of the need for certainty. You are going to need to get very still and find out what calls to you. You will need to tolerate potentially extreme discomfort. It is amazing how much more we are willing to tolerate the discomfort that we know, even if we don't like it, even if we know it's not taking us where we want to go. It is so much more tolerable than embarking on a course where you don't even know what that discomfort is going to feel like. It is that fear of the unknown. And what I'm inviting you to do here is to tolerate or be willing to tolerate that discomfort that comes with change. What else you will need? You will need to be willing to take responsibility for that decision. You need to be willing to fail because that is a possibility. And you're also going to need to be willing to succeed. And sometimes the willingness to succeed can be sneaky. You may not realize that you are not willing to succeed. And yet sometimes we sabotage ourselves. We're so close to success and yet we fall short. And I recently reported a podcast on that. I'll link to it in the show notes. The name of it escapes me, but it talks about exactly that. Finally, you'll need to develop a willingness to stay the course. Once you have made your decision, you are probably going to start second guessing that decision. And when you start second guessing that decision, that is the time that you're going to need to remind yourself of all the reasons why you're making that decision. And that is why it is so helpful if you have done the work, if you have asked yourself the questions so that you feel solid, knowing that regardless of the outcome, this is the choice that you want to make. So with that, my friends, I wish you so much luck. I don't know that luck is really the right word, but it's the best word that comes to mind right now. I wish you support. I wish you courage, and I wish you success in whatever choice it is that you are making. If I can support you in any way in making a decision, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to support you in that. And you can find me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email. I'm always happy to hear from you. And I would also like to offer that if you find this podcast helpful, please do write a review, provide a rating, because it will help others just like you find this podcast. And I know I keep asking every podcast, and I hope I'm not tiring you out, but it really is helpful. And I'm going to be talking pretty soon about something that I'm working on. And I think you're really going to like it. So for all of you, I wish you a beautiful week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this podcast episode has resonated with you, and that if you are stuck in a decision, that these questions help you move forward. That's all for now. Thanks so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.